Film culture has developed an obsession with form, a bottomless search for the ideal version of every movie. Enter into any online film forum and you'll see countless comments about runtimes, aspect ratios, director's cuts, audio sources, formats, transfers, color correction. All this metadata has more to do with industry standards than with the way that we experience watching a movie. We get caught up in the gap between reality and ideals. Part of this formalism comes from a decades-long streamlining of the industry that's also resulted in the dreary, data-driven, platform-optimized content cinema of today. Every edit is on action. No one crosses the line. Every character and cast member seem designed to capture a demographic. Plots are tortuously airtight, and everyone saves the cat. Our current moment feels like the buttoned-up 1940s, where a combination of tightening morals, wartime nationalism, and rigid distribution networks due to studio-run movie theaters led to dull, profitable garbage. Independent film in the 1940s was so anemic that it was called Poverty Row, and Hollywood was raking in profits but stuck in a creative rut. In the 2020s, getting an independent movie made may be easier, but access to profits and an audience are much harder. However, we have the benefit today of access to past eras when movies were wilder and less concerned with formalism and mass appeal. We can look to the past not out of nostalgia, but to relearn the joy of imperfection so that we can recognize and celebrate it in the movies of today. Greetings from behind the beaded curtain. I'm Klon Waldrip, and this is the first episode of the Late List podcast. My goal for this show is to release the pressure that's been building up in my skull ever since I stopped working at the video store. I'm going to drill a hole in my temple and let all of my dumbest ideas goosh out into your eager ears. My real-life friends don't want to hear my undercooked theories about the narrative structures used in nudist cam movies or the socioeconomic conditions that influence Brazilian underground cinema. That stuff is for my pretend internet friends like y'all. This season is all about Something Weird Video, a company that's been dedicated to preserving raw and bizarre cinema for over 30 years. They wallow in the weird and want to share it with the world. They released thousands of titles, a gargantuan amount. In an attempt to give as full a picture as possible in only a few episodes, I'm structuring my story around a list of 69 titles that might begin to illustrate their aesthetics and refined taste. This is just a primer, but hopefully these 69 movies will be a representative sampling of what Something Weird has become known for. I'll be discussing around 5 movies per episode, and in discussing these movies, I'll be able to cover the history of Something Weird, the personalities involved, as well as the cinematic landscape that allowed for the creation of some of the most bizarre films ever made, and how they may have gone into the literal landfill if it weren't for this small group of film freaks.
Television won't show it, and magazines can't. But this picture does.
It's quite possible that many of you in the audience are not fully aware of how serious a situation this could be. So, if I may make a suggestion, for just 1 minute, let's all forget moral standards.
For the best things in life cost money. The Weird Lovemakers.
They do everything.
Creating their own mad world where love becomes an act of frenzy. And to the weird ones, pain becomes a source of special excitement.
They call her Shanty Tramp. Who is she? Where did she come from? How did she get the name of Shanty Tramp?
Watch these girls dance and make unashamed love in this tropical paradise.
This is no country club. This is a nudist camp.
You may find a live snake or rat under your seat.
A real dead body is given away to some lucky person.
For the first time in a feature-length motion picture, filmed in shocking bloody vision, live monsters crash out of the screen, and in audience, you are suddenly surrounded by monsters. You become a party to the horror. You are a potential victim, and no one is safe in bloody color.
So as my video company developed, I obviously used material that interests me, and what's the word I want to use? I'm the sole source for certain genres of film. I mean, basically, there's other video companies, they specialize in dramas, comedies. I specialize in the bottom of the barrel, trash, film that everyone thought was worthless and nobody would have any interest in. It's 1995, and who wants to look at Santo beat up blob monsters from Venus? But we all do, so that's why I exist.
After spending time as a projectionist at a drive-in movie theater, a record store owner, a concert promoter, and a manager for punk bands like Dead Kennedys and TSOL, Seattle native Mike Vraney went into videotape bootlegging. Not the camcorder in the back of the theater kind of bootlegger. No, he had unusual taste and a hunger for the obscure. He saw a hole in the home video market for the vintage exploitation films he loved and began hunting them down. Starting out with short 16mm nudie films, he learned how to get them transferred to VHS, eventually amassing a collection of any oddball or forgotten scrap of film he could unearth. He had atomic-era duck and cover film strips, grisly highway safety films, movie trailers, concession stand bumpers, military training shorts. Eventually, he'd include 35mm feature films to his collection. Something Weird Video started out officially in 1990, selling VHS through fanzine ads and at horror movie conventions. You could say it started out as a hobby, but Vraney was no dabbler. In my late teens and 20s, Something Weird Video occupied a huge spot right in the front of my brain. I watched a ton of their releases and pored over every catalog as they came out. I forced friends and roommates to watch objectively terrible movies that I still love, like Thar She Blows and Mantis in Lace, and I'd put on their twisted sex compilations during parties. As much as I love them, I'm a poser compared to some of the hopeless cases that I've met in online forums. What are their lives like? Who has time to see that many volumes of Bucky Beaver's Big Bust Loops? Still, I feel like I've been steeped in their catalog long enough to act as a sommelier of something weird. On this episode, I'll be discussing 69 through 65. The Sinful Dwarf, Ecco, Teaserama, Country Cuzzins, and Teenage Gang Debs. Number 69. The Sinful Dwarf from 1973, directed by Eduardo Fuller.
The Sinful Dwarf, a depraved psychotic misfit crazed by the charms of young girls and luring them from the city streets into a hellish snake pit.
My son will show you the room.
Oh, Peter, I don't want to stay here. What do you think of that blonde girl?
The Sinful Dwarf, a tantalizing bride trapped in a web of terror.
Last night I heard noises.
Were you snoring?
No. And today people have been walking in and out of that door at the end of the corridor.
Have you seen my wife?
She left. You wanted to see what was in here. Well, now's your chance.
I've got a new girl you might be interested in.
Watch out for it. The Sinful Dwarf. Admission restricted.
The Sinful Dwarf is a 1973 Danish-American co-production, meaning I'm about to attempt to pronounce words I've never encountered the likes of. So to my countless listeners in Denmark, I apologize for butchering your language. And to everyone else, please leave angry comments anywhere you see this posted. And this goes for any error. Please leave a comment right out in the open telling me how wrong I am. I'm not sensitive. I'm going to get things wrong, and you'll look smart correcting me. You can say nice things, mean things, right things, or wrong things. Just keep them coming. It's all engagement. And who wouldn't want to engage with The Sinful Dwarf, one of the most notorious films in the Something Weird catalog? It's so fucked up that after watching it, you'll want to volunteer at the soup kitchen just to clear your karmic slate. It's the gentle yarn of Olaf, a sadistic little person who's the muscle for his mom's brothel. It's up to him to kidnap the girls, lock them up in a dank attic, and get them hooked on heroin. It might sound like a dream job, but Olaf's under a lot of pressure. His neighbors are always on the verge of discovering his attic full of junky sex slaves, and his mom is a drunk that likes to perform musical numbers.
Olaf! Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Laila Lash.
Any lovely senorita, clique Cuban castanet. There's a certain caballero. She's trying hard to forget. When a lovely senorita starts to dance and gently sway, don't be shy then, caballero. Walk right up to her and say, come and dance the choo-choo bumper. It's not a rumba, not a samba. Oh, no, no, no. It's a dance that makes you go.
To relieve stress, Olaf plays with his collection of well-worn wind-up toys that look like something from a Mike Kelly art installation. The maniacal performance by Torben Bell as Olaf places the character in the same league as any of the classic mother-loving cinema psychos like Norman Bates or Bad Ronald Wilby. Over the years, Bill has been the subject of many rumors. I can neither confirm nor deny that he wound up marrying and having a child with co-star Ann Sparrow, or that he hosted a kids show right before filming this sickie. What I can confirm is that as a child he was part of a traveling performance troupe. Throughout the 70s and 80s he appeared in at least 15 movies and worked behind the scenes as a stage manager and prop master. He also had a theater career in addition to his film work. I never found footage or photos of Torben hosting a kids show, but I found posters and photos for a 1971 stage production of The Ballad of the Sad Cafe, where Torben plays the role of Cousin Lyman. Located in Copenhagen, the theater was known as the Ungdommens Theater, which translates to youth theater. To an American, a youth theater might sound like it's a puppet show or a community theater for little kids. But based on the fact that Sad Cafe is a dark Southern Gothic story, I'm going to assume that they're using the word youth in the same way that it's used in Youth Hostel. Bill also performed in a 1979 stage production directed by Danish actress Gitte Billström, who was known for performing in family films like Benny's Bathtub. Billström and Bill were also voices in a Danish version of Tintin in the Land of the Sharks, an animated feature based on the popular Belgian comic. It's possible one or all of these connections have contributed to the idea that Bill was a children's show host, but if there's some kind of proof out there, I'd love to see it. In my research, I grew to adore him. I found a photo of him as a child playing drummer boy while leading a parade in his hometown, and one where he's posing with a Halloween witch decoration and flashing a mischievous smile. It seemed as though Torben was a valuable and beloved part of the Danish entertainment world. Tragically, he died young in 1993 at the age of 47. The Sinful Dwarf was made in Denmark but shot in English for the American and British markets. For much of the cast and crew, this would be their only film credit, and many used pseudonyms. You'd be tempted to think they weren't proud to be in this minor masterpiece. It was made with the sense of absurd humor, but there's a true ugliness that can't be ignored. Similar to Pink Flamingos from the year before, kidnapped sex slaves are a major plot point. But kidnapping seemed to be in the zeitgeist during the early 70s, as films like They Call Her One-Eye, The Candy Snatchers, Date with a Kidnapper, and Last House on the Left were all made within a few years of one another. But I guess the kidnapped teens of the 70s became the satanic panic parents of the 80s and 90s. The film was brought to the U.S. by exploitation kingpin Harry Novak and distributed through Box Office International Pictures. Harry is a crucial part of the Something Weird story, and we'll be hearing more about him throughout this series. But where the hell did this movie come from, and why would anyone think it was a good idea? As early as the 1950s, Scandinavian countries had a reputation in the U.S. for their unrestrained on-screen sexuality. The Swedish film One Summer of Happiness from 1951 had won the Golden Bear in the Berlin International Film Festival, but horn dogs all over the world praised its skinny dipping scenes, which offered a rare chance to glimpse bare breasts on the silver screen. Ingmar Bergman's Summer with Monica from 1953 featured enough nudity and sexuality that the exploitation filmmaker Kroger Babb bought the U.S. rights, dubbed it in English, hired Les Baxter to rescore it, and sent it out to American drive-ins as Monica, Story of a Bad Girl. The mid-1950s communist panic in the U.S. added a layer of immorality to public perception of these films, and by the 1960s, Scandinavian films like I Am Curious Yellow and I, a Woman were mixing the political and sexual while bringing in tons of money. Most importantly, they were winning high-profile court cases that would allow the screens of America to be filled from corner to corner with ball sacks, boobs, boners, blowjobs, and more. The art house market provided a respectable cover for explicit content and subversive topics, while American filmmakers like Radley Metzger, Alex de Renzi, and Joe Sarno were filming in Europe or appropriating the European style for the 42nd Street theaters. A porno pipeline had been well established that brought European film to American audiences. The Danish film industry of the 60s had become creative in their attempts to boost box office. The advent of television in the 50s had caused ticket sales to steadily decline, and most of the films being shown there were American productions. The Danish Ministry of Culture helped out by setting in place a film fund supported by the government's revenue from ticket sales. This fund helped establish film schools and museums and provided institutional support that's allowed Danish cinema to thrive while other European countries have seen a decline in output. In avant-garde circles of the 60s and 70s, the conversation about cultural support of the arts centered around access. Who would benefit from these programs? The ABC Cinema was a group of a few dozen artists, students, and filmmakers who were attempting to democratize the medium. Their motto was the revolt of the amateur against the professionals. They tried all manners of collectivist experiments, like shooting their films simultaneously on Super 8 cameras and using multiple projectors running at the same time to exhibit the final product. Their films could be personal, satirical, political, and sexually explicit. For instance, their 1970 film, Franhulos, translated as Without Kin, would feature images such as a female Christ crucified on the beach, a spaghetti western parody, and a couple having sex in a wooden contraption. Who could have predicted that the movement wouldn't have much success? In 1969, they were arrested during an occupation of a film school, but by 1971, they had disbanded. While their goals were to create a non-hierarchical film model outside of the pressures of commercial demands, they were pressing the culture towards a looser definition of what could be allowed on the screen, inadvertently benefiting the most commercially driven branch of cinema, the exploitation film. Denmark would be the first country to officially remove film censorship restrictions in 1969, and sleazeballs from all over the world flocked to the country to take advantage. The explosion of production made pornography Denmark's #1 export. An arms race of novelty began, where filmmakers attempted to outdo one another in their depictions of extreme acts. Soon, all manner of horrors were being filmed that would shock the rest of the world. Movies involving animals or minors were unfortunately all too common. Now, I suspect that this sharp decline from fun in the sun skinny dipping into bizarre criminality was driven less by the audience's desire to see these acts than the filmmaker's desire to film them. Either way, A black market developed, and in the public imagination, if you uttered the right code word to the right pervert in the moldiest corner of the scariest porno shop, you could get anything you wanted. Or even worse, you could get more than you bargained for. Director Eduardo Fuller was an American who directed only a few films. The Loves of Cynthia from 1972 was directed using the pseudonym Arnold Baxter, and The Sinful Dwarf under the pseudonym Vidal Rasky. If you're going to direct The Sinful Dwarf using a pseudonym, you could sure do worse than Vidal Rasky. Supposedly Nicholas Poole, the American financier of the film, hosted lavish parties in his penthouse hotel during production, then skipped out on the bill once the shooting was done. On the Danish side of the crew was producer Bent Toming, who produced Fuller's Loves of Cynthia as well as 2 other 70s porno films with innocent-sounding names like The Blue Balloon and The Birthday Party. You might be surprised to learn that the dirtbag Danes and ugly Americans that put together The Sinful Dwarf didn't have enduring film careers, but they left us this bad taste manifesto before they hung up their movie cameras. It's not unusual for films in the Something Weird catalog to have a similarly murky lineage, but few movies are as sensational as The Sinful Dwarf. It's the kind of art designed to generate rumors and urban legends, and with few reliable facts available in English, we're left only to speculate about the truth.
Oh, that's a wonderful, Lola. Oh, that's very, very good.
Number 68, Ecco, from 1963, directed by Gianni Proia. In Italian, mondo means world, but in cult film circles it's a signifier that this thing is unusual, like adding a go-go to the end of a title or sploitation at the end of a word. A mondo movie is a form of documentary made up of loosely connected vignettes intended to examine bizarre behaviors or subcultures, almost always containing disturbing imagery intended to shock Western audiences. While it isn't the first, the best place to mark the beginning of the movement is in 1962 with the international hit Mondo Cane, co-directed by Paolo Cavera, Franco Prosperi, and Gualtiero Jacopetti. Filmed across the globe, Mondo Cane makes everyone in the world seem a little weird, even you.
Mondo Cane is a spectacle as big as the eye can see, as intimate as the pleasures of motherhood. Mondo Cane is a picturization of the beautiful, the unusual, and the laughable, and the unique. Mondo Cane shows you the worst of man's bloodlust and the most daring of his foolhardy braveries. Mondo Cane will show you man's masochistic self-mutilation reaching for his God, and his defiance of death, seeking eternal life.
Mondo Cane had an ingredient that was unheard of in popular documentaries that preceded it, a sense of irony. Until then, documentaries were dry and highbrow. They were something you had to sit through, not something you went to see. The movie juxtaposes bizarre and novel customs throughout the world, revolving around broad themes like death and burial, courtship, food, animal care, fashion, and more, all shown with delight and disgust, usually both at once. Scenes of nudity and animal cruelty mingling with breezy social commentary made it immediately notorious. but it's clearly made by talented filmmakers and is always well produced, even when they resort to occasionally staging footage. Ritz Ortolani and Nino Oliveri's score was a hit, with the theme song More winning a Grammy and earning an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Song. Before his career in film, co-director Gualtiero Jacopetti claims to have been part of the anti-fascist resistance in Italy during World War II, but he got into more trouble as a journalist for publishing sexy pics of Sophia Loren in his newspaper, even serving a year in prison. His introduction to film was writing commentary for the proto-Mondo film World by Night, also known as Il Mondo di Notte from 1960. World by Night documented the spicier elements of nightclubs and strip joints from Hong Kong to Broadway, serving as a bridge between the nudist camp documentaries, burlesque films, and the Mondo flick. In addition to Jacopetti, one of the producers of the film was Gianni Proia, who would take over the series as director with World by Night 2 in 1961, which was more the same nightclub cheesecake, but pushing the stranger elements such as a singer in a teddy and fishnets tearing a phone book and bending a steel bar. Proia also made World by Night 3, which American audiences saw in a sliced-up form as Ecco, taking parts of World by Nights 2 and 3 and adding a few scenes and English narration by actor George Sanders.
The globe has spun around many times before the probing eye of the motion picture camera. So many times, in fact, that you may wonder if there is anything left to discover. But to the persistently curious, the world continually reveals new secrets and sights. As Shakespeare put it, there are more things in heaven and earth and between sunset and dawn than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Therefore, Ecco, which means look, witness, observe, and behold. We show you a world beyond your most outrageous fantasy.
Ecco may sound like a cobbled-together mess, but it turns out to be one of the best films in the genre thanks to some moments of truly excellent filmmaking. Beefcake muscle studs, a trip to the Grand Guignol Theater, a performance artist running knives through his cheeks, indigenous dancers, Portuguese whale hunters, chicken blood-drenched Satanists. Monks ascend stone cliffs in rope nets to a monastery so high in the sky that it may as well be heaven itself. In fact, they vow to never leave, even their bones. In a chilling end to the segment, the camera zooms past glowing votives and into a room stacked high with bleached human skulls. A gruesome craft or a religious ritual? Ecco details the human body as used by humans for humans all over the world. Ecco hit screens during the flap of Mondo Cane imitators with titles like Mondo Oscenita, Mondo Bizarro, Mondo Inferno, and of course Russ Meyer's Mondo Topless. These usually didn't have the budget to send film crews all over the world, so they would resort to cheap tricks. Many would simply stick to easy-to-access locations, or they'd chop together documentary footage from other films and add music and narration. And many scenes were simply fake. American producers Lee Frost and Bob Cressy were behind a number of these ripoffs, including Ecco. Frost and Cressy were an important part of the LA exploitation scene and had a hand directly or indirectly with many Something Weird video titles. Together they would slime the silver screens with titles including House on Bear Mountain, Hot Spur, A Climax of Blue Power, and the notorious Love Camp 7. While the pair were fluid with their duties, Frost was generally the director, while Cressy was the producer. They used various credits and production companies with respectably bland names like Olympic International Films and B&M Productions. Cressy's friend and rival Dave Friedman, whose autobiography, A Youth in Babylon, Confessions of a Trash Film King, will be a frequent and colorful source in this podcast, had this to say about the pair. Cressy handled Frost like a fine violinist would handle a Stradivarius. Cressy would say to the industry as a whole, Lee Frost is the best. There's no one who can approach him. He is the finest, and that's all Frost wanted. Cressy didn't need to pay Frost. He just told him how good he was. That's sad but true. With many of the Mondo movies they had a hand in, they would chop together footage from any source they could get their hands on as long as it was strange or exploitable. They would even stage their own scenes as needed. Ecco exists in its current form because of this process. It just so happens that the source material was of higher quality than some of the other films they were cannibalizing. Frost rewrote narration to be read by the esteemed British actor George Sanders, and it's believed that he directed the scenes of the satanic ritual himself.
100 years ago, in this same house, the elect would have bought the devil's favor by sacrificing a young virgin. First hallowing her with sacred oil before an inverted crucifix, they would have slashed open her throat and her breast. As her life drained slowly away, they would have danced around her body, and each male disciple in turn would perform a final abomination upon her purity. Today, all of this has been stopped. The only blood comes from a beheaded chicken held dripping over the girl's body. And the only form of assault permitted is to lay hands symbolically upon the sacrifice. Mephistopheles is served by gesture only in the 20th century's so highly enlightened society.
Frost's career spanned into the 90s, moving from one market to another, one year making weirdo horror oddities like The Thing with Two Heads, while directing redneck drive-in favorites like Dixie Dynamite a few years later. Cressy, however, left the world of cinema in the 70s after being shot by the LAPD. Friedman again. Cressy always liked to carry a gun. One night he was in a bookstore at Hollywood and Western. He looks up and there's 3 guys beating the hell out of this broad. They got her down on the ground and they're kicking her. Cressy runs over and goes to his car and takes his gun out and holds the gun up, saying, "Stop, I'm calling the police. Stop or I'll shoot." And this guy whirls on him and says, "We are the police, motherfucker," and shot him twice right in the stomach. And then the guy shot his dog. He almost died, and he never really recovered from that mentally. LAPD, they're dirty Harrys down here. In true Frost Cressy fashion, Ecco was a success, thanks in part to an advertising campaign which read, "If this film frightens you, it's because the world is frightening. If you find it horrifying, it's because the world is filled with horrors. If it shocks you, it's because we are a shocking race. If you find it filled with beauty and hope, you have understood it. We dare you to see Ecco." In poor old Orem, Utah, the newspaper ads promised an incredible orgy of sights and sounds, and they really just weren't ready for orgies in Orem in 1965. A heated debate at the city council meeting led to youth ticket bans for films with objectionable content and the formation of the Utah County Council for Better Movies and Literature, also known as the UCCBML, a true sign of exploitation success. Jacopetti and Prosperi would go on to co-direct a series of controversial films such as Africa, Blood and Guts, Mondo Cane 2, and Goodbye Uncle Tom, while Cavera would split from the other two and move from genre to genre, making jolly comedies and even a western. The Mondo genre never really went away, though it would morph radically in the ensuing decades. In the 70s, there were occasional hits like Shocking Asia and Mondo Magic, but the returns were dwindling. Croia attempted a retread of his earlier films with World by Night Today in 1976 to little attention. One of his final works was a state-produced series that received critical praise in Italy, but saw him reprimanded by officials that found it too cynical and critical of the state. The genre saw a comeback with the shockumentary tape craze, kicked off by the 1983 VHS release of the 1978 film Faces of Death. And you can find the Mondo spirit today in everything from bizarre foods with Andrew Zimmern on the Travel Channel to Vice News to Atlas Obscura. Number 67, Teaserama from 1955, directed by Irving Klaw.
Hubba hubba auga, Hachimama, Betty Page, Tempest Storm, Lily St. Cyr. These buxom beauties give me a boner to bust the bank. My trousers are getting a little tighter if you catch my meaning. My shirt's getting sweat stains. I'm gonna have to pop an extra blood pressure pill. This is no joke. My body's tingling. My vision's getting blurry. My chest is getting a little tighter.
But on a more serious note, this is not a very entertaining movie. A friend recently purchased the Variety's Teaserama Double Bill Blu-ray and proclaimed it a death march. Both films are sparse recreations of burlesque nightclub routines from fetish art distributor Irving Klaw. The 1990s Betty Page mania made these top sellers in the Something Weird catalog, but it's tame, even compared to the contemporaneous short bondage films being made by Klaw and Page. Today, the most interesting moments outside of the scenes with the bigger stars are with Vicky Lynn, billed in ads as the famed female impersonator, who's presented just as playfully as the rest of the cast.
Hello, baby darling.
Don't you call me baby darling, you cheap thing.
Honey, why should you say I'm cheap? I just happen to have an impediment in my reach. Money. That's the last thing I think about before going to bed every night.
Well, I've got news for you. If you don't give me some money right now to buy some new clothes, I'm going to walk right past the pool room without a stitch of
Honey,
clothing on.
you mean to tell me that you'd walk right past
I would.
Without a stitch? And shame me in front of all my friends?
I would.
Well, I bet you would at that. Well, I just happen to have a few bucks with me, honey. So, let me see. All right. I just cashed my relief check, see? 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. What's this $5 bill doing here? See? What do you do with my loot? She took it. Well, how about giving me a kiss now to seal the bargain? You call that a kiss?
You call yourself a bargain?
How do you like a thing like that?
Neither a documentary about a style of performance nor a document of a performance, Teaserama is a fantasy of a performance from an imagined past. Klaw never gives us typical documentary establishing shots of, say, the exterior of a theater, a ticket booth, an audience filing into their seats, backstage crew setting lights into place. Instead, the stage is the set, and the set is the stage. Sound effects recordings of an audience are inelegantly spliced in, adding to the artificiality. Strictly confined in both location and perspective, even when the action takes place in a bedroom, we're aware that it's contained within a stage. At any moment, we can expect to see the curtains peeking into frame. While there are many acts that appear in both films, the headliners were the draw at the time. Varieties from 1954 features Lily St. Cyr, the blonde bombshell sung about by The Who in their song Pictures of Lily, and 1955's Teaserama stars the legendary Tempest Storm, and both of them feature the iconic Betty Page. Claw made these after the success of the 1953 film Strip-O-Rama, also starring Page and St. Cyr. Tempest Storm had previous experience on screens thanks to Russ Meyer, who was so inspired by her gargantuan jugs that he made his first movie, the now lost 40-minute French Peep Show. Burlesque shows have a long, varied history that's guarded and argued over by a horny and cantankerous group of historians, but it seems safe to say that in the 50s, these live shows were in a state of decline. However, the burlesque movie microgenre lasted only a skimpy moment as impatient audiences sought out more explicit thrills from nudist camp documentaries, scandalous foreign art house films, and soon enough, the nudie cuties. The two films also feature brief comedy routines between dancers. Burlesque comedy was the raunchy cousin to the more prestigious and lucrative vaudeville circuit, but comedians loved strippers, so they were often willing to hone their chops to the rowdier burlesque audiences. Joe E. Ross was one of the awful comedians that appears in Teaserama. He's famous for being in the TV series Car 54, Where Are You?, but he should be more famous for passing Rodney Dangerfield his first joint.
Hello, doll. How are you?
You're late.
I'm sorry I'm late. I had an automobile accident.
An automobile accident?
Yeah, I fell out of the patrol wagon.
Oh, stop those bum jokes, you cheapskate, you.
Oh, don't call me a cheapskate. I'm not cheap. You know I go out. That's one thing about me. I don't care what I do with my money as long as I don't spend it.
Oh, yeah?
And you know what I'm really doing? See, I'm putting away enough money for a rainy day.
Oh, yeah? Well, how much have you saved?
Well, I'll tell you the truth. If it ever rains 2 days in a row, I'm broke.
Irving Klaw made a fortune selling pin-up photos of celebrities from his 14th Street bookstore in New York City, calling himself the Pin-Up King and eventually drawing controversy as the authorities realized that he was also selling bondage and fetish photos and art. In 1957, Betty was summoned as a witness against him, but her experiences with Irving and his sister Paula were mainly positive, and as a result, she was never called upon to testify. The double feature of Teaserama and Varieties played theaters until the early 60s. However, he continued to be hounded by law enforcement and died at age 55 in 1966. Here's an excerpt from a 1977 Village Voice interview with Paula Klaw, Irving's sister and business partner. Paula was in charge of posing the pictures. She tied ladies to chairs, hung them from clotheslines, gagged them on beds, and manacled them with leather. The pictures had titles like Betty Comes to New York and Gets in a Bind. It was wonderful in those days, Paula says now. We had politicians, judges, prime ministers coming here to buy our photos. They would even park their limos right outside on 14th Street. After a while, however, Irving got busted for sending the stuff through the mail. Lengthy court cases ensued. Fighting back a tear, Paula says, "It was all that killed Irving, I think. They said we sold porno. We did not sell porno." Tempest Storm's list of rumored lovers contains Oscar winners, multiple platinum-certified musicians, and at least one president. She married a handful of times and starred in a few more films, notably Mundo Depravidos, directed by her fourth husband, Herb Jeffries. Jeffries was a star in his own right, a black singing cowboy who starred in films like Harlem on the Prairie and The Bronze Buckaroo in the 30s. Storm lived until 2021 and loved the attention of her fans, performing well into her 80s. Betty Page's story is tied tightly with 20th century Americana. It's got something for everyone. After retiring, she began following Christian minister Billy Graham, having no regrets about her past as a pinup model. Through the 70s and 80s, she struggled with paranoid schizophrenia and violent outbursts. While spending many years in state mental care, her fame grew unbeknownst to her. In her absence from public life, she'd become a meme, a part of the collective mental image map. Once she began re-engaging with her fame later in life, she initiated a campaign of brand management that seems incomprehensible today. But she was ready to tell her story, and we all wanted to hear it.
when a lot of guys look at your photographs, they think you could be the girl next door that was their girlfriend.
That's what they say a lot in the magazines, calling me the girl next door. And then in the next breath, they're calling me the devil and with horns and everything. Even my camera club, my fan club rather, in Kansas City, their logo is me with the breast sticking out of a little black outfit with horns and a tail, like a devil. And I don't like that at all. I was never devilish or anything like that. I think I was a pretty good girl those years.
Part of her brand management, however, was litigious. The people in her life had advised her to hire attorneys to collect money being made from her image. This put something weird in their sights. On her behalf, but perhaps without her knowledge, they filed a lawsuit against the company for using her likeness to advertise the films in their catalog. Page lost the lawsuit and was required to pay Something Weird's legal fees. The company waived the fees thanks to an offer of free advertising in Playboy magazine from Page's fan and friend Hugh Hefner. The entirety of her life is too overwhelming to detail here. Her highs and lows and detours accidentally made her one of the most influential celebrities of the last 70 years, and a regular figure on Forbes' list of richest dead celebrities. Film is a form of ideal creation. Filmmakers craft the present to be preserved as a document of the past, a shared memory, a communication through time without body. The camera lens supplants the perspectives of the cast and crew that create the film, and the screen is the audience's portal to this moment. The images that Betty Page and Tempest Storm created in their youth were powerful enough to become frozen in the public consciousness. Storm approached the process of aging confrontationally. The ideals she created in her youth became layered with humanity as the public watched her body change. Page retreated away from the public, refusing to be filmed during interviews for fear that the public would judge her for the weight she'd gained or the way she'd aged, understanding the fragility of the ideals she'd created, and perhaps the fragility of all ideals. Number 66, Country Cuzzins, from 1972, directed by Bethel Buckaloo. The legacy of RKO Pictures in the history of film is assured. Their buzzing radio tower logo is attached to movies that will be watched for as long as movies are watched at all. Citizen Kane, King Kong, Bringing Up Baby, films by Alfred Hitchcock, Val Lewton, Roberto Rossellini, and Howard Hawks, and they threw stars on the screen like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, Katharine Hepburn, Robert Mitchum, Marlon Brando, Gloria Graham, Cary Grant, Ida Lupino. They were pioneers of high-end, low-budget films, innovating within genres by allowing talented technicians to explore new approaches of time-tested material. They turned the crime thriller into film noir. Horror was taken out of foggy castles and brought into the 20th century, and sexual tension was introduced to the previously chaste Western. But today RKO is known for being out of business, unable to weather changing market forces after the United States government brought antitrust suits against many studios which disrupted monopolistic practices. This was only a setback for most of the studios, but RKO was purchased by eccentric millionaire Howard Hughes and ground down to nothing by the end of the 50s through legal disputes, divestments, and piecemeal acquisitions. The story of RKO is fascinating in its own right. Its downfall coincided with the end of the studio era and the opening up of opportunities for independent filmmakers, and one RKO employee made the jump from the studio system to the grindhouse with gleeful ease.
Well, I had 35, but
You know, it's not so much bulky. You know, how long can you keep this stuff and it starts to decompose?
Okay, so those get tossed, or?
Yeah, I toss a lot of that stuff.
I have a question on the back of the chairs here. All are equipped with ashtrays.
Yes.
You have a sign up there that says no smoking.
No smoking.
Oh, that's the way the sheets were designed.
We at that time really.
So they weren't added on later. Those are just for those are the original theater turf.
Today, from the bygone days.
Incredible.
But when the executives were here, like he said,
we
had to smoke.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just curious.
It's when they used to smoke the marijuana. That's what used to drive me crazy.
Harry Novak started his career as an ad man in the Chicago offices of RKO, learning how to book and market films to audiences all over the world. In addition to their own in-house productions, RKO was the distributor for Disney, and it isn't hard to imagine Harry, the tried-and-true perv, suggesting that Tinkerbell's skirt be just a little shorter on the Peter Pan poster. Much like Roger Corman starting out at 20th Century Fox, this time in the mainstream gave Harry all the skills he'd need to strike out on his own. Once the studio shut its doors, he could have gone in any direction, but Harry was a red-blooded smut peddler. Starting with what he knew, Novak went into distribution by snatching up steamy foreign items and dubbing them into English and slapping them with lurid titles and posters. Harry's toupee couldn't handle the Windy City, so he headed to Hollywood and teamed up with director Pete Perry and theater owner Max Gardens to form Box Office International, and they began producing their own films and continued distributing exploitation films from all over the world. Box Office International were far from innovators. They were followers and they weren't hiding it. Riding coattails was the business model. Taking whatever the public was interested in and throwing it on screens as cheaply and quickly as possible, adding lots of soft-core sex. If they'd been making movies in the 20s, they'd have had flappers doing the Lindy Hop topless, and if they'd have been banging them out in the 2010s, they would have had naked girls rolling around on piles of silly bands. They also relied on evergreen topics of exploitation cinema, like teenage runaways, women in prison, blaxploitation, fake sexual health documentaries, and what else? Rednecks.
Meet the Sliners and their daughter, Moonbeam. She sort of takes after her ma, except her ma ain't so fond of critters like Lord Hamilton here.
You're a pig, just like the pigs you raised.
Pigs makes better friends than some people I know.
Now, each of them thinks they know their young and best.
She's gonna end up pregnant.
She's a swiner through and through. They don't fool around with fellers that way.
I sure am glad you came over, Jasper. I really do like to do this.
Jasper Jenkins, or any one of a whole half the pig keeper's daughter.
Throughout the 70s, Harry Novak and company made a handful of light-hearted pastoral romps set in the dirty South. Tobacco Rudy, Midnight Plowboy, and The Pig's Keeper's Daughter, among others. It was an unusual time to bet hard on hick flicks. They were very much out at the box office. Sleaze auteurs like Russ Meyer and Herschel Gordon Lewis had turned away from the topic 5 years earlier after lackluster returns on Mudhoney and Moonshine Mountain, respectively, and it would be years before Deliverance and Walking Tall would become hits. But Harry knew there was gold in them thar hills. Country Cuzzins centers around the Peabody family reunion, an event that has the whole brood peeling off their dungarees and rolling around in the burlap. But poor Billy Joe just ain't built for the farm life. Played with effervescent enthusiasm by Renee Bond, Billy Joe spends most of her days hosing herself down and letting her cousins Jeb and Jeter cop a feel in exchange for a few swallers of moonshine. Highfalutin cousin Prudence comes in from the big city with her nose in the air, and young Leroy is asked to show her around the farm.
Would you believe I went out with a man that looked just like that?
You sure look funny, ma'am. You sure do. But them pigs, they ain't bad looking.
Oh, really? Well, just because you're my cousin, that doesn't give you the right to make disparaging remarks about my appearance.
Hey, Cousin Prue. Well, I didn't mean to make you mad. Shucks, I ain't rightly sure it is what you're saying, but since how pretty you are, shucks, I think you're as pretty as any pig I ever seen.
I don't believe I'm going to talk to you anymore.
Leroy is played by box office international regular John Tull. He was arguably one of the best actors in the Buckaloo troupe. His affability and good looks somehow made him the perfect handsome hillbilly, and he would play the lead in Midnight Plowboy, Below the Belt, Sassy Sue, and a handful of others throughout the 70s.
Why, my goodness. Ma'am, you better be careful. The thing's loaded and it's liable to go off.
But back to the Peabody farm. After a few turns on the rope swing and tugs off a jug of Mountain Dew, Prudence winds up winning a game of Catch the Chicken. She has such a great time that she invites the whole Peabody family down to her pad in the city. As the date of their visit approaches, Prudence begins to get cold feet and thinks it would be a laugh to tease her country cousins by having her friends dress up in comical hillbilly garb. But the Peabodys are no squares. They charm the pants off the hipsters, including a young George Buck Flowers. So if you've ever wanted to see the bum from Back to the Future's Pork and Beans, find a copy of this movie right away. You might be tempted to think that director Bethel Buckaloo was using a pseudonym to direct, but no, he proudly emblazoned his government name on a number of box office international pictures. Getting his start on the set of Herschel Gordon Lewis movies, he would move his way up to the director's chair for Harry, and he'd even act in one or two movies. In an interview for the excellent website Rock Shock Pop, actress Sharon Kelly had this to say about her early career working with Buckaloo. Buckaloo was the perfect director. He was very even-tempered, mellow. I think he was good at editing in his head while he was shooting. These movies were so low budget, raw stock was a major expense, so shooting efficiently was a valuable skill. He was also arguably the best-looking director doing sexploitation in the 70s, but by now he's dead or worse, way old. Young Sally was shot in chronological order. Day one was the opening scene in the back of a van doing that monologue I'd burned into my brain. Before the first shot, Buckaloo leaned in and quietly taught me everything he wanted me to know about movie making. He pointed and said, "That's the microphone, and that's the camera. Don't look into the camera." And I never did.
The Dirty Mind of Sally McGuire is brought to you 3 times daily at 12:20, 5:30, and 10 p.m. from high atop a mountain where only gurus go. Sally beams sexy music from me to you with love. Love is what I preach, and even though we are separated by space, in my mind I'm with you every tender moment.
Perhaps taking the themes of country Cuzzins seriously, Bethel would use his family on the set of his films. His wife Marlene was a script supervisor on many films and even an editor, and his daughter gets credit for wardrobes in one of his final films, Magwheels. Most notoriously, son Mark Buckaloo appears on screen in Country Cuzzins. Mark has had a long career behind the scenes, working as a camera operator and lighting tech on some of my favorites like Miracle Mile and Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. As a fun side note, Bethel and young Mark would make national news in 1963 when their Great Dane Shadow scared a high-strung Shetland sheepdog who died a few days later. The sheepdog's owner sued for damages, but the case was dismissed after Mark testified that Shadow had never been in a fight before and was his pal. He even hopped on his back and rode him like a pony. Bethel Buckaloo worked in film throughout the 70s. After his time with Novak, he worked with the legendary Matt Cimber as an assistant director and production supervisor. He'd also find his way into forming a production company with brooding 50s tough guy actor Ralph Meeker and his wife Colleen Meeker. They would only make 2 films together, after which Bethel would fold up his director's chair for good. Amazingly, he'd live until 2023 when he died at the age of 94. Country Cuzzins isn't that much better or worse than any of Harry and Bethel's collaborations, but it features a juicy role for Something Weird superstar Renee Bond. Her girl-next-door looks made her a favorite in the early days of adult cinema, and perhaps one of the most recognizable transitional performers of the era. She starred in softcore features, but was just as eager to appear in hardcore material, which drove some actresses away from the business. A native Californian, Renee was at ground zero when the LA sex film industry hit its stride. There's some missing pieces to the story of her introduction to the film world, but it's generally agreed upon that she got her start at the suggestion of a boyfriend or husband. At this point, I'd like to give credit to Robin Bougie's 2-part feature on Renee in his Cinema Sewer books, numbers 3 and 7. Robin is a dedicated pervert, and he managed to dig up hard-to-find info about her, and even interviewed her childhood best friend. He fleshed out her story remarkably, but even with all his research, there's still plenty of mysteries in Renee's story, and that's just fine with me. Besides, who cares about timelines? Renee was living in a Los Angeles swingers house in the 70s. Porno just happens. The partner she's most identified with is Rick Lutz. The two would appear together countless times in both softcore and hardcore films, and off-screen they were a well-loved couple on the LA porno circuit. Rick was a walking hard-on and every bit a swinger with his Neil Diamond haircut and tobacco-gray grin. Renee was a hard-working entertainer. In addition to her film work, she appeared in adult magazines and danced at the notorious but air-conditioned Ivar Theater in Hollywood. She was an innovator for her era. She was one of the first porn stars, if not the first, to receive breast enhancement surgery. Unfortunately, it was a botched job in more ways than one. Harry Novak described her sensitively in a 1999 interview with Femme Fatale's magazine. Of course, during the Hillbilly series, you'll notice in the early stage that Renee has no tits on her. She was a nice girl, and she came to Pete Perry and asked if we'd loan her the money to get her tits blown up. She was very cooperative and did whatever was necessary. She'd help the crew or whatever had to be done. Renee was also one of the first to start a fan club, and she'd even sell gently soiled panties. Unfortunately, her business model may be all too familiar these days, as this item from the April of 1980 issue of Hustler magazine explains. Missing skivvies. Last year, Renee Bond, P.O. Box 4261 North Hollywood, California, 91607, ran an ad that said, "I'll send you my slightly used panties, personal letter, and photo for only $7. We wanted to check these dirty drawers out, so we asked one of our operatives, codenamed Eddie, to order a set for us. Eddie sent Renee a money order, and it was cashed almost immediately. 4 months later, we're still waiting. We mailed Renee a letter asking what happened to the shit-blasted bloomers we'd ordered. No response, no skivvies, no nothing. We're still waiting for a word or a whiff." In case you didn't know, companies like Renee Bond Company are shills to find out who the suckers are so that their names can be put on a list and sold to other mail-order houses. One dealer who used to run grab bag and warehouse clearance ads in several men's mags told us, "These names are like gold to us. You know that if they're going to bite for a girl's dirty underwear or somebody's promise of $20 worth of smut for $3, they've got to be easy marks. And the big companies will trip all over themselves trying to buy the names from us because some porn dealers figure they've got a moral right to separate suckers from their money. Of course, we're just guessing. We still haven't received our panties, and neither have several other angry people who ordered them, according to our mail. Worse yet, Eddie is starting to complain about all the junk mail he's getting from every two-bit dealer in the country." While this is a weird chapter in the story, it seems like Renee was only guilty of lending her name to sleazy businessmen. She had begun to move on from the world of film by that point and exited the public eye. Amazingly, she re-emerged in 1986 on a game show called Break the Bank, where she claimed to be a bankruptcy specialist, and over the course of a few episodes, she would win $9,000 worth of cash and prizes. Renee remarried, converted to Judaism, and helped to raise 2 sons. She spent her time breeding Yorkies and Persian cats, unfortunately not with each other. Sadly, her career in the sex business re-emerged when her silicone breast implants began to leak and deposit in her liver, eventually causing cirrhosis, which killed her at age 45. Today, we still have more Renee Bond than we can handle in one lifetime, thanks to the producers that recognized her talent, the audience that wanted more, the preservation efforts of Something Weird Video, and her own drive and joyous spunk.
These are our returning champions, Renee and Lonnie Levine. To date, this husband and wife team has won in cash and prizes over $4,100. They are back today to try and beat their new challengers for another chance at our fabulous prize vault here on Break the Bank.
This legendary comedian is best known for her hat with its $1.98 price tag and her Lonnie and Renee.
Minnie Pearl.
That's right, Minnie Pearl, and her familiar greeting of howdy. Renee caught you out of breath there. You weren't quite sure you had it. It came out. That's what you need in the nick of time, and you're in control of the board now with Minnie from the name Minnie Pearl. You also have Oscar, Walt Disney, Steamboat Willie, and Pluto. Would you like to try and solve the puzzle now, or go on? Need a decision?
We'll go on.
Go on. All right, then here we go. Question number 6 for both teams playing now. According to Ralph Waldo Emerson, if a man can make a better one of these, the world will be the path to its Lonnie and Renee.
Mousetrap.
That's right, Mousetrap. The world will be the path to his door. Okay, Lonnie and Renee, you have all the clues up here now. Oscar, Walt Disney, Steamboat Willie, Pluto, Minnie, and Mouse. You have to try and solve it now. What's the solution?
Mickey Mouse.
That's right. Mickey Mouse is right. You've solved the puzzle. Oscar won an Oscar, Walt Disney, Steamboat Willie. Steamboat Willie, his first cartoon character using Mickey Mouse. Oh, well, we'll see what happens right in a second when we return here on Break the Bank!
Number 65, Teenage Gang Debs from 1966, directed by Sandy Johnson.
And now, KRUZ, the Sound of Cruise, presents the King of Cruisers. That's right, the self-made man, the man-made legend, Mr. Mambo Remus.
Hello, cruisers, losers, lowriders, and linkhorns. Hello, ham-bones, hopheads, drunks, freaks, punks, geeks, glue sniffers, and gruntheads, zit pickers, and shit kickers. I'm Mambo Remus, and I'll be with you all afternoon, right through the cruise countdown and on into the night, bopping with you on the boulevard. So let's get cooking.
The Something Weird Video catalog is filled with obscurities. That's part of what makes it such a captivating group of films. Many of them were made with no intention of preservation, just quick cash. Decades later, even the cast and crew only recall faint memories of them, or had hoped they'd never resurface. It takes a clever and clued-in weirdo to look at a film as obscure and out of date as Teenage Gang Debs and think, I'll bet I can make some bread off this thing. Part of the genius of Something Weird was to categorize their films into totally invented or inverted genres. Gone were the tired video store designations of comedy, thriller, horror, and drama, replaced with nudie cuties, grindhouse follies, Frank Henenlotter's sexy shockers, Johnny Legend's untamed videos. It was a primitive version of the algorithmic recommendation model. If you like X, then you might like Y. Some titles sell themselves, while others require some context. Just take a peek at the untamed video titles. You can probably figure out what Girl Gang is all about based on the title, but you'd never know what you were getting into with It Won't Rub Off, Baby. And while these two movies aren't incredibly similar, you can begin to understand the vibe when you look at the rest of the category. Here's the introduction from the catalog. Welcome to the wonderfully wacky world of Johnny Legend's Untamed Video. Take a walk on the wild side when troublesome teenagers, sleazy sex kittens, way-out hippies, country bumpkins, big bad bikers, Mexican wrestlers, and other social deviants who populate these films live life fast and hard. Sounds like a great time, right? In the 1990s, you could sell a lot of leopard print, and an old exploitation movie with a title like Tarzana the Wild Girl or Swamp Virgin is bound to wind up in the VCR of a rockabilly with a few extra sawbucks in his pocket. And indeed, rockabilly is the world that curator Johnny Legend lives in.
Hey, that's right. Here we are with Johnny Legend and the creature from the Blues Lagoon with our bass master back there and Elvis and myself on the drum set doing a song written by Johnny Legend himself, none other, known as the Pencil Neck Geek, Bo Diddley style.
Back when I was a kid, life was going swell until something happened to everything to hell. That night my daddy stumbled in, all pale and weak, and set a woman up the block that gave birth to a kid. Mom said, tell it to the circus, what the heck? Dad said, nope, this one's a pencil neck, and if there's one thing lower than a sideshow freak, it's a gritty, scum-sucking pencil neck kid. If you take a pencil, it won't hold lead. Looks like a pipe cleaner attached to a head. Had a buggy with body with a brain that leaks. You got yourself a gritty pencil neck geek. Pencil neck geek, gritty freak. Scum-sucking peahead with a lousy pussy. He's a one-man, no-gut losing streak. Nothing but a, nothing but a, nothing but a, nothing but a, nothing but a pencil neck geek. Yeah.
Born as Martin Margulies in 1948, Johnny Legend was a familiar figure in underground culture. Calling him famous or even influential would be a stretch, but he's undeniably made a mark in American pop culture, even if American pop culture doesn't know it. He belongs to the contrarian slice of baby boomers that should have been barefoot in the mud at Woodstock, but preferred Link Ray to Jefferson Airplane and would rather stay home and watch the brain from Planet Eros on The Late Show than to see Zabriskie Point. Much like the B-52s, John Waters, the Cramps, or painter Robert Williams, Johnny Legend was helping to create an American trash aesthetic from thrift stores, discount bins, and flea markets. It's hard to say what he's known for because he threw himself into so many different projects. He's a rockabilly singer, a wrestling promoter, a filmmaker, an actor, and a general cultural curator. He never truly broke through in any of those worlds, but he developed a persona that stuck. Long gray hair and a beard that went down past his chest, wraparound shades, and loud-colored sequined shirts, plus an excitable personality that forces fun down your throat. His collaborations with wrestler Classy Freddie Blassie are probably the most widely known of his projects. Legend had known Blassie since he was a child, sneaking backstage at LA wrestling matches, and Blassie had grown to trust Legend's opinion and go along with his crackpot ideas. Here's Blassie's song, Pencil Neck Geek, written by Legend with Billy Zoom from the band X on guitar.
You see, if you take a pencil that won't hold lead, it looks like a pipe cleaner attached to a head. Add a buggy whip body with a brain that leaks, you got yourself a grit-eating pencil neck geek. Pencil neck geek, grit-eating freak, scum-sucking pea-head with a lousy physique. He's a one-man, no-gut losing streak. Nothing but a pencil neck geek. Pencil neck geek. Soon the geeks were popping up all over town. You couldn't hardly sneeze without knocking one down. After a nice juicy steak, if you need a toothpick, Just reach for a geek. They'll do the trick. One day we cut one up for fish bait. Learned our lesson just a little bit late. Soon as the geek hit the drink, the water turned red. Next day, sure enough, all the fish were dead. Pencil neck geek, gritty freak, scum-sucking peahead with a lousy physique. He's a one-man, no-gut losing streak. Nothing but a pencil neck geek.
Blassie also co-starred in the 1983 film My Breakfast with Blassie, co-directed by Legend and starring comedian Andy Kaufman. Set entirely in a Hollywood restaurant during a breakfast meeting between Kaufman and Blassie, it's a parody of the art house hit My Dinner with Andre. But instead of thoughtful discussions on the New York theater world, Blassie and Kaufman verbally assault other restaurant patrons and discuss the perils of celebrity. At the risk of getting too far off topic, I'd like to bring up the VHS called Rockabilly Glamour Size, produced by Legend collaborator Ron Weiser and shot by the same crew that shot My Breakfast with Blassie during the very same week. Legend cooked up the idea for My Breakfast with Blassie while sitting through a torturous screening of My Dinner with Andre. Afterwards, he pitched the project to his friend Kaufman and took him to a screening of Andre where the comedian fell asleep. Kaufman, of course, was a huge Blassie fan, but on the set of the film, he would meet Legend's sister, Lynn Margulies, who was one of the actresses that's insulted by the pair on screen. The two would go on to date until Kaufman's death, and her efforts since then have helped to keep his work in the public eye. She directed the documentary I'm From Hollywood about his wrestling career, and she assisted and advised on subsequent Kaufman projects like Man on the Moon.
You know who I am? Do you know who I am? I am Andy Kaufman from Taxi. TV star. I am a TV star. I am on television once a week. Okay? I am Andy Kaufman, and I'm eating here, and I am trying, excuse me, I am trying to have a conversation with my friend Fred Blassie, 5-time world heavyweight wrestling champion. Okay? He is a very famous man. I am a famous man. We would like to be left alone if you don't mind, okay? So just leave us alone. All of you, leave us alone, please.
Similar to Kaufman, Johnny Legend has used wrestling showmanship and bluster in his own output. Hosting Something Weird's Untamed video series seemed like a perfect fit in some ways. Throughout the 80s, he'd had a relationship with Rhino Records, who'd re-released the Freddie Blassie EP. Through Rhino Home Video, Legend created compilation VHS that were perfect for late-night reefer sessions.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is 1993. I am Johnny Legend, and you are looking at a modern-day miracle. This is the Jungle Girl of the 90s. She calls herself simply Jungle Girl. Okay, we're going to go back now over 20 years to the early 70s and look at a totally forgotten mini-epic, sort of an R-rated, shall we say, potboiler of the time. She is also the Aztec Mummy's, shall we say, latest squeeze. We call her an Aztec Mummy Mama. And right now, we're going to go back and look at Tarzana, the Wild Girl. Ow! Let's take a beat and get another one so we don't have...
He put together a few collections of B-movie trailers called Sleaze Mania, 3 volumes of animated obscurities called Weird Cartoons that featured the warning, "Some of these cartoons may seem offensive by today's standards, but what the hell, this is America." There were also tapes like Dope Mania and Commercial Mania. Plus, Legend was a director and actor in just the kinds of films Something Weird was putting out. He appeared in the film Pot Parents Police, also known as The Cat Who Ate the Parakeet from 1972, an indie anti-drug movie made to be shown at Jerry Lewis's short-lived family film theater chain. Legend appears in a substantial acting role as the dope-smoking hippie boyfriend. He also directed the rockabilly porno classic Young, Hot, and Nasty Teenage Cruisers, starring Serena, John Holmes, and the unlikely appearances of rockabilly performers Charlie Feathers and Ray Campy. Existing in this world of rock and roll, sex, wrestling, weed, and counterculture comedy, Johnny Legend was the perfect person to host the Untamed video series for something weird. And after all, how far a leap is it from hot and nasty teenage cruisers to Teenage Gang Debs?
Teenage Gang Debs. They all talk, fight, and love just one way. Dirty. They're as mean and vicious as the cement jungle they live in. Teenage Gang Debs, the go-go girls who go too far. Kick-happy, thrill-hungry, always reckless, and willing. From backroom binges to back alley rumbles, anything goes, as long as it's violent. They respect no law but the code of the gang and swear their allegiance in blood. Underaged, oversexed, girls who won't take no for an answer. Teenage Gang Debs.
Street fighting, bike riding, belt whipping teenagers, so saturated with soda pop that even their zits are bubbling with fizz. Bah, and who can understand their hipster patois? One girl says nuts to you, Buster, and if I wanted to cool it, as they say, I'd drink a refreshing iced tea. If I'm being honest, a lot of these kids seem better suited to a society cotillion than a back alley rumble, but that's part of the goofy charm of Teenage Gang Debs. It's the story of Terry, a vicious, ambitious social climber from Manhattan, making her way up the ranks of Brooklyn girl gang The Rebels, and she won't rest until she's at the top, no matter who she has to step on to get there. She's based so closely on Lady Macbeth that the filmmakers actually gave William Shakespeare a tongue-in-cheek writing credit. The cast seems plucked out of hair salons and garages, and many of them didn't have careers in acting ahead of them. Though it features the debut performance from Eileen Dietz, who is credited as Eileen Scott. Horror fans will know her as the demon Pazuzu in The Exorcist, or from any of the indie horror films she's been in the last 20 years. Also in the cast is Janet Banzett, who made the rounds in the New York City exploitation scene, appearing in films by Michael Findlay, Barry Mahon, Doris Wishman, Joe Sarno, and the Amaro brothers. She supposedly appears in Breakfast at Tiffany's, and most notoriously in The Party at Kitty and Studs, also known as The Italian Stallion, starring a young and hungry Sylvester Stallone. In the mid-'60s, the filmmaker C. Davis Smith had found himself as the cinematographer and editor on a few sexploitation films from directors like Doris Wishman and Barry Mahon. Eventually, he would come up with the idea to use some scraps and unused footage from a few of these films to compile a too hot to be screened mix called Banned from 1966. The poster had this quote: "Every time this film is played, it's another crime. The people of Philadelphia must be protected." Banned was the first film from CIP, a production company formed by Smith and other New York City exploitation upstarts Jerry Denby, Tony Scaretti, and Teenage Gang Debs director Sandy Johnson. Confusingly, CIP was also called Crown International Pictures until they'd heard of Novak's company and changed it to CIP. Many of their films were foreign pickups with additional sex scenes spliced in, but Teenage Gang Debs was their first original feature. Each of the CIP members were able to take on various duties to get the projects completed, making credits and authorship confusing. It didn't take long for the partnership to break down, with Jerry Denby making a few more films and C. Davis Smith having a long career behind the scenes. Director Sandy Johnson left the world of film and moved to Chicago. Unfortunately, he would be killed in an auto accident in the 70s. The person on the crew with the most impressive career, however, was the composer Steve Carman.
When you say butt, it means you want the beer that's got a taste that's number one. Nationwide is on your side.
Wrigley Spearmint Gum.
Johnny Quickie.
Wrigley Spearmint Gum.
The big fresh flavor. Hershey, the great American chocolate bar. I love New York.
Carman started out on the folk music circuit of the 1950s and eventually began writing film scores for movies like Girl on a Chain Gang, Teenage Mother, and Nudes on Tiger Reef. Eventually, he would stumble into jingle writing, where he'd make a fortune writing themes for Doublemint Gum, Budweiser, Nationwide Insurance, and many, many more. For Teenage Gang Debs, he would write the score and 2 dance songs sung by Big Lee Dowell, an obscure R&B singer who lived in New York and recorded with Epic Records. The songs You Make Me Mad and Be a Black Belt are played during the film in their entirety during goofy dance numbers and were released to no notice on a 45 at the time and have since been compiled on the excellent Something Weird compilation album.
You move on the floor, that way you learn some more. Start with a front punch, then do another front punch, and then you do a side kick, and then another side kick, and baby, that's all you do, and then you're a black belt too. White belt, you are just the beginner.
Teenage Gang Debs was unsuccessful during its initial release in 1966, which had come as no surprise since it's a black and white film about teenage gang violence at a time when teenagers were watching the Monkees and Batman and listening to the Beatles sing Good Day Sunshine. And it couldn't succeed in the grindhouses since it had no sex or nudity, and it certainly wasn't going to play around the block at art houses that were showing Warhol's Chelsea Girls. Although it seems closer to the distant druggy world of the Velvet Underground, who would release their first album just a few months after this was released. But just because Teenage Gang Debs wasn't popular doesn't mean it wasn't onto something. In addition to releasing it on home video and a recent Blu-ray deluxe edition, Something Weird would put out Teenage Gang Debs shirts and release vintage press books. A few years earlier, a short-lived punk zine of the same name would pop up out of Bethesda, Maryland, and in recent years, musicians have started covering the Lee Dowell songs. None of these are consequential pop culture signifiers of success, but there's something. It's a film out of time, and perhaps that's what made it so watchable decades later. Proof of the endurance of switchblades and rock and roll, expressing both the past and the future, without being ahead of its time or of its time. I hope you've enjoyed the Late List podcast. My name again is Klon Waldrip. If you enjoyed it, please share it with a fellow weirdo. You can listen to this as a podcast, so check the show notes to find links to my blog and web store where you can order a zine version of this episode. I truly want to make it possible for you to consume this in the method you prefer. There may be long gaps between full-length episodes, but in these gaps I'll share more freeform episodes, so please be sure to subscribe. If you'd like my Instagram, Letterboxd, or email, you can go to my link tree in the show notes. I'd like to thank Lisa Petrucci from Something Weird Video for being a supportive cheerleader of this project, as well as the folks at Dr. Clean Productions who published the piece that originated the project in their Dr. Clean magazine. And of course Matt Simpson, the Duke of Podcasting from the Movie Melt podcast, for hosting this and being a general sounding board advisor and friend throughout the process. Until the next episode, I hope that all of your wishes and used panty orders are fulfilled.